Ethan Miller had always believed that his grandfather's land was sacred. 10 acres of rolling hills, creeks, and wildflowers nestled just outside the peaceful town of Rosebend, Virginia. The Miller family had lived there for 3 generations. It was where his grandfather taught him to fish, where he built his first treehouse, and where his parents were married beneath the old oak tree that had stood since the Civil War. To Ethan, the land wasn't just property, it was legacy. So when he opened his mailbox one sunny morning and found an official letter from the Rosebend Estates HOA stating that his back acre had been reclassified as common property for a new community leisure center, his world tilted. Shocked, Ethan marched straight to the door of the HOA president, Amelia Whitmore, a woman known for her crisp blazers, icy smiles, and her suspiciously close ties to a high-end resort development firm. She confirmed it with a smirk. The land he'd mowed, loved, and paid taxes on for over 15 years was now being reallocated for a luxury pool, cabanas, and cocktail bar. Ethan stood stunned on her porch, the letter still in hand. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a battle he'd been preparing for his entire life. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The thump of music from the Whitmores' welcome party next door echoed across his field until after 1 a.m., making it impossible to relax. He sat in the kitchen with a mug of black coffee and his grandfather's worn leather deed laid flat on the table. The same acre Amelia Whitmore claimed as common property was right there, clearly outlined with hand-drawn borders based on the original 1952 survey, long before the HOA ever existed. The next morning, Ethan called Jacob Reyes, a retired land surveyor and a longtime friend of his father's. Jacob arrived within hours in an old Chevy truck filled with gear. "If those 1952 markers are still around," Jacob said, rolling up his sleeves, "we'll find them. And if they are where I think they are, your HOA is in deep trouble." By sunset, the 2 men had flagged 4 cast-iron survey markers buried under layers of moss and soil. Each one confirmed what Ethan already knew. The HOA's new map was fraudulent. Worse, it wasn't just about the land grab for the pool. Jacob found that the Morgan family's newly built deck, funded partially by the HOA, sat nearly 12 feet onto Ethan's property. But that wasn't all. One of the old survey markers was near a rocky ridge that Ethan had always ignored, until Jacob's eyes lit up. "You know what this is?" Jacob knelt, brushing away dirt. "This ridge matches a historical land registry from the 1940s. It was flagged as a potential Native American artifact site. If we can confirm even a few pieces were found here, the entire area qualifies for emergency historical preservation." That night, the gears in Ethan's mind turned like a seasoned chess player. The HOA had underestimated him. They saw a quiet, single man living in an old farmhouse, someone too sentimental and solitary to fight back. What they didn't know was that Ethan had studied civil law in college and had spent the last 10 years helping small farmers preserve their land rights. This wasn't a fight, it was a trap, and Amelia had walked straight into it. The next morning, Ethan drove to the county records office. His cousin Valerie, who worked there, helped him pull the original 1952 and 1978 surveys. The creek behind the property had shifted after a major flood, but the legal boundaries hadn't moved. Ethan's grandfather had never redrawn the lines because they didn't need redrawing. "They're trying to rezone the land under emergency development rules," Valerie said, scanning the documents. "And guess who submitted the application?" Ethan didn't even need to guess. Amelia Whitmore's husband was CFO of a company called Ridgeview Developments, the same one that had built 3 resort-style neighborhoods in nearby counties. Each one had followed the same pattern: aggressive HOA enforcement, mysterious reclassification of land, and quiet luxury development approvals. Ethan stepped out of the office with a folder of proof in one hand and a plan in the other. The game was on. The next 48 hours moved fast and dirty. On Monday morning, Ethan woke up to the deep rumble of diesel engines echoing across his backfield. Pulling back the curtains, his jaw clenched at the sight of a yellow bulldozer flanked by 2 black utility trucks, all marked with the HOA's logo. Pine Hollow Estates, elevating community living. Workers in matching polos were unloading orange cones and digging equipment. One of them began spraying neon lines right through Ethan's grandmother's rose garden. Still barefoot, Ethan marched outside with his phone in one hand and the original deed in the other. "This is private property," he shouted. "You're trespassing." A man in khakis holding a clipboard and latte looked up from his plans. "Got an order right here, sir," he said flatly, tapping the paper. "We've been authorized by the HOA board to begin pre-construction assessments for the Community Leisure Center." "On whose authority?" Ethan barked. That's when she arrived. Amelia Whitmore stepped out of a white Lexus SUV in a beige designer trench coat and oversized sunglasses. "Ethan," she purred, as if this were all a minor inconvenience. "You're creating unnecessary tension. Let's not make a scene. You've got a bulldozer 10 feet from my late grandfather's fishing dock. That's not tension. That's a war declaration." Amelia's smile tightened. "We're within our rights. The board's recent vote, backed by a modern survey, establishes this parcel as shared green space. You really should have attended more HOA meetings." Ethan stepped forward, holding up his phone. "I have Jacob Reyes's certified report from this weekend and original boundary markers backed by county maps. You know what else I have, Amelia?" He opened his email. "A time-stamped notice from the County Preservation Office. As of 6:03 a.m., this entire acre is flagged for archaeological review." The clipboard guy swore under his breath. One of the utility workers started packing up equipment. The bulldozer operator killed the engine. Amelia's expression faltered. "That's a bluff. Try me," Ethan said. "I've got 3 neighbors who saw your team dig last night and remove boundary flags. That's tampering with historic land." The silence broke when Rose, Ethan's 78-year-old neighbor, appeared on the sidewalk, phone held high. "I recorded the whole thing," she said loudly, "including the part where your project manager said, 'Don't worry, she's got the mayor in her back pocket.' Want me to send it to the newspaper?" The workers froze. Clipboard guy turned pale. Amelia's cheeks flushed, and for the first time her words caught in her throat. "We're done here," Ethan said calmly, eyes locked on hers. "The next time you come near this land, bring a lawyer and a judge." Without another word, Amelia spun on her heels and marched to her car. But Ethan knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan sat at his kitchen table long after the last utility truck pulled away. The ceramic mug in his hand had gone cold, the coffee inside untouched. Across from him, Rose scrolled through her phone, collecting still shots and time-stamped videos from her security system. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Ethan said, "This isn't just about me, is it?" Rose looked up, eyes tired but fierce. "It hasn't been about just you for a while, honey." The realization hit Ethan harder than he expected. This wasn't just a land dispute. It was a pattern, a power grab dressed in HOA language, backed by fake surveys and whispered promises of rising property values. "They want this whole block, don't they?" he muttered. Rose nodded. "Pine Hollow used to be a neighborhood. Now it's a business plan. You're just one of the last people standing in their way." That night, Ethan pulled out his dad's old file box. Inside were faded papers, maps with pencil annotations, and photographs of family picnics by the creek before the flood of '78. He ran his fingers across a handwritten note from his grandfather. "Protect this land. Don't let them carve it up." Those words meant something now. Over the next 2 days, something inside Ethan shifted. He'd spent months reacting to every move the HOA made. Now, he was ready to act on his own terms. He called Jacobson, the surveyor. Can you get me everything they submitted for permits in the last year?
Already working on it, Jacobson said. And Ethan, you were right. Their survey firm? It's owned by Eleanor Whitmore's cousin. Conflict of interest all over it.
Ethan's stomach turned. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed only lit the fire inside him brighter. Later that afternoon, Ethan received a call from Vince, his cousin at the county recorder's office.
You're not going to believe this,
Vince said. The HOA filed preliminary zoning requests for a wellness retreat expansion, code for luxury condos. They'd need your acre and Rose's backyard to pull it off. So it was never just a community pool? Ethan said slowly. It's a resort, a damn vacation destination, right here in our backyards.
You're not wrong,
Vince replied grimly. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him, not physically, but emotionally. He wasn't just a man trying to protect his grandfather's fishing dock anymore. He was now the firewall between Pine Hollow and a wave of corporate greed masked as neighborhood improvement. That evening, Ethan stood on the old ridge behind his house. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the fields his grandfather once tended with his bare hands. He looked toward the Morgans' property, their hot tub bubbling just over the illegal property line. Let them soak. They had no idea the storm coming their way. The next morning, Ethan opened his front door to find a small cardboard box sitting on his porch. Taped to the top was a yellow sticky note. These belong with you, R. Inside were half a dozen arrowheads, wrapped in tissue paper, along with a black and white photo of his grandfather kneeling in the same field behind Ethan's house, holding one of the very same stones. His chest tightened as he looked at the photo. Grandpa Henry, young and proud, with that crooked smile Ethan had inherited. Rose had remembered. Later that day, Jacobson pulled into the driveway, his truck bed loaded with equipment. I spoke to a contact at the State Historical Society, he said, as he set up his gear. If those artifacts are legit, which they are, you've got a shot at a full historical preservation designation. Ethan's eyebrows raised.
What does that mean exactly?
Jacobson smiled. It means if they try to dig so much as a post hole in your backyard, they'll need permission from half a dozen government agencies, and good luck getting it. It was the first genuine glimmer of hope Ethan had felt in weeks, but it got better. That afternoon, his cousin Vince called again, excitement in his voice. You're gonna want to sit down for this. Remember that weird reference on your granddad's deed about 1952 public land records? Ethan nodded.
Well, turns out your grandfather didn't just own that acre.
He leased part of it to the county for utility easement back in '61. The main power box that runs electricity to over 60% of Pine Hollow sits on your soil, legally. Ethan blinked. You're telling me the HOA's clubhouse, Morgan's hot tub, even Eleanor's floodlights, all powered through your corner lot? He stood in silence, letting that sink in. Vince chuckled.
You want leverage? Buddy, you've got the whole fulcrum.
By nightfall, Ethan had a folder packed with old surveys, the updated boundaries from Jacobson, the photo of his grandfather, the arrowheads, and a signed statement from the county confirming the utility placement. It was time to flip the game board. He didn't want revenge. That wasn't his style. What Ethan wanted was recognition, that his land mattered, that his family's legacy wasn't just dirt to be reclassified on a spreadsheet, that the quiet values of a generation raised on respect and hard work still meant something. Rose stopped by with another casserole and a grin. Word's spreading. You shook Eleanor's little empire.
I didn't plan to become a neighborhood rebel, Ethan replied.
No, she smiled. But sometimes the right people get pushed too far. The next morning, Ethan made 3 phone calls. One to the State Historical Society, one to the local newspaper, and one to a lawyer who specialized in rural land protection. The message was clear. Ethan wasn't just defending property, he was reclaiming legacy, and he wasn't alone anymore. Ethan stood at the edge of his property, coffee mug warming his calloused hands, as the autumn wind rustled through the trees lining the old creek bed. Just beyond the fence, workers were clearing out a space for the new community leisure center. on the HOA's actual land this time, not his.
6 months ago, that fence had been torn down, trampled, mocked. Today, it stood taller than ever. But the real transformation hadn't been in the wood and wire. It had been in Ethan himself. He used to be quiet, the kind of man who nodded politely to his neighbors, kept his head down, and focused on his land. The old ways, the honest ways, honest. He never imagined himself standing before crowded HOA meetings, challenging power suits with nothing but an old deed and the truth. Yet here he was. After the last explosive board vote, Eleanor Winters had vanished from public view. Her home went up for sale, her name scrubbed from HOA letterhead. Some neighbors whispered she'd left town. Others said she was facing legal scrutiny after new evidence surfaced about her hidden contracts and backdoor deals. Ethan didn't gloat. He didn't have to. The real victory wasn't in what he'd taken from Eleanor. It was in what he'd regained for his family. The land was safe, and more than that, respected. Jacobson's archaeological report had passed state review. Ethan's acreage was now a protected cultural site, officially recognized for its historical significance. A preservation grant had even been approved to help install educational signs and pathways along the creek, his grandfather's creek, for school children and local visitors. But the biggest shift? Ethan wasn't fighting alone anymore. The neighbors he once suspected of siding with the HOA had started stopping by, asking for help. Mrs. Garcia wanted to know how to challenge a violation she believed was made up. The Hendersons invited Ethan to dinner and quietly asked if he'd review their deed. Even Tyler Morgan, once the loudest pool party host in town, showed up one evening with a cooler and an apology. "Guess we let the wrong people do the talking," Tyler had said, avoiding eye contact. "You saw what we didn't." Ethan didn't say much in response. He simply offered a chair, a cold drink, and a nod. Forgiveness came slowly, but it came. At the next community meeting, when Rose announced that Ethan had been elected to the newly formed Property Rights Committee, unanimously, he accepted the post not out of pride but out of duty, the kind of duty that ran deep in his bones, just like his father's and his grandfather's. As he walked back toward the house, Ethan paused by the old oak tree, the same one his dad used to rest under after long days of fence repair and field work. The wind carried the scent of earth and leaves in quiet purpose. Ethan had grown into a man who could stand tall not just for himself, but for others who couldn't, and that made all the difference. The town newsletter headlined it, "A Victory for Common Sense," but for Ethan, it was something far more personal. He sat on the front porch of the farmhouse that had stood for nearly a century, his grandfather's hammer marks still etched into the original beams. It had survived wind, flood, and time, but it had almost been lost to something far worse, unchecked power disguised as progress. Not anymore. The new community leisure center, once planned for the heart of his back acre, had been built instead near the main road, exactly where Ethan had suggested. Not a single shovel had touched his soil. The same neighbors who had once questioned him now praised him at block parties. They'd stop him on his morning walks to ask for advice about their own boundary issues, or to thank him for protecting something bigger than property lines, heritage. And Ethan had accepted a role he never expected, chairman of the newly formed Property Rights and Historical Preservation Committee. With a quiet sense of duty, he now reviewed construction requests and helped others navigate the same system that once nearly bulldozed his life. His porch became a gathering place again, the kind of spot where folks brought over pies and stories and questions about deeds, surveys, and fence lines. "Just trying to do right," Ethan would say with a shrug. The land was now protected under state law thanks to Jacobson's findings, and even the university had taken interest. They offered to fund a community dig along the old creek bed, where artifacts, once seen as curious trinkets in his grandfather's drawer, had been officially dated back hundreds of years. A walking trail was being planned there, with signage, with stories.
with the truth of the people who came long before Pine Ridge had ever been platted on a development map. And the best part? It would all bear his grandfather's name. Legacy, that's what mattered now. The Morgans? They'd quietly taken down the oversized speakers. Tyler even joined the Noise Ordinance Subcommittee, and Ethan suspected Samantha was the one who insisted. As for Eleanor Winters, her house had sold within weeks, and the buyer, a retired librarian named Judy, joined Ethan's preservation team just last month. Her first motion, a neighborhood garden near the front entrance, open to everyone. Ethan stood and stretched, the setting sun casting long golden shadows across the field. A soft rustle came from the mailbox. Rose, his neighbor, now dear friend, had left a fresh-baked pie and a handwritten note. "You saved more than your land. You reminded us what this place was supposed to be. Thank you." He tucked the note into his shirt pocket, where it would stay for a while. Some victories come with headlines, others come with pie, and the sweetest ones come quietly, when no one is looking, when a man chooses to fight not with fists or fury, but with patience, truth, and roots too deep for bulldozers to touch. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about keeping what's yours. It's about honoring what came before you and protecting what's meant to last. Ethan didn't plan to become a neighborhood hero. He didn't raise his voice or seek the spotlight. He simply stood in the doorway of his family's legacy and said, "No further." And in doing so, he reminded his community that integrity still has a place, even in a world that's always rushing toward the next development. The real victory wasn't just stopping a bulldozer or exposing corruption. It was teaching everyone that justice doesn't always arrive with loud headlines. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through patience, through roots planted generations deep. And maybe the most powerful thing Ethan did was give his neighbors the courage to stand up too. Because once someone proves that the little guy can win, it becomes a little easier for everyone else to believe. If you're facing unfair HOA practices or property disputes, don't panic and don't give up. Start by gathering your documentation: original deeds, surveys, photos, and tax records. Seek out neighbors who may have been affected too. There's strength in unity. Contact your county assessor's office or local historical society. They often hold records or programs that can protect your land. And above all, stay calm and steady. Don't let bullies push you around, especially if you're defending something that carries emotional and historical weight. The law often favors the truth. You just have to be willing to uncover it and present it properly. Your property isn't just dirt and fence lines. Sometimes it holds the soul of your family, and that's always worth fighting for.